I won't be speaking tonight. We have a wonderful guest speaker, my good friend Jess Landon, and her whole family's here tonight. I call her Jess, but it's Jessica. And Jessica is going to have a wonderful share for us tonight because it is her 3-year sobriety anniversary. And these wonderful people behind her are the reason that she's sober to this day. And so it's so nice that your family came to support you in this. And I thought it was pretty cool. It's January 3rd, so the 3 years on the 3rd. I like that kind of similarity there. It's really cool. I want to tell you a little background about how I met Jessica. I met her through my best friend Krista right here, the fastest texter in the West. And it's interesting because back in 2011, 2012, maybe it was 11, Justin, my brother, is going to be here shortly. We were looking for a place to live, and Jessica was renting out this house in Beverly Hills. And this is at a point where she was in her addiction, and I saw her as an alcoholic. We sat down, had this wonderful kind of spiritual talk about my brother, and I saw her as she was. And then years later, Krista's like, you gotta see, because I would hear the stories from Krista, obviously, of you and your addiction, and she would tell me things, and I was always worried about you. And I didn't even know you that well. So we ended up going to the Cheesecake Factory one night over at the Grove. And I just sat down with Jessica, and I was in complete shock. I could not believe her transformation. It was just unbelievable. Her family will attest. So we just started talking. We hit it off instantly, and I started talking about this group, Signature Grace. And she was immediately like, oh, what's that? That's interesting. You know how Jess gets excitable? She's like, oh, what is it? Slowly but surely, she started coming, I think, to Adam's place in Malibu was kind of the first place where God just kind of moved in on her. And she started becoming part of our family. And she led the 42nd Signature Grace was it a year ago? I think you told your story. And I was so bummed that night because we usually record these and we put them up on YouTube, and the recorder wasn't working. It was such a good share. But I've heard Jessica before. She's invited me to an AA meeting over in West Hollywood. And I was just sitting there listening to this girl speak, and just tears just rushing down my face because she not only has a story, it's a miraculous story, but she says it with such sincerity and meaning because it matters in her life. And it just always touches me where you came from and how you got here, and we can just see all the influences around here. And real quick about Jesus, because we just want to talk about him real quick. Jesus gets a bad rap sometimes because he's taught by religion as a police officer, and he's the total opposite. In fact, it says that he's the good shepherd and he lays down his life for his sheep. And there's a story in the scriptures about these 99 sheep that had it all together, and this one lost sheep that just kept wandering off for whatever reason. And when the sheep would wander off, Jesus just spent all night going to find that lost sheep. And it says that when he found the sheep, he rejoiced more than ever because of that lost sheep over the 99, because he said, I'm the good physician. He came to heal the sick, not the well. And so, Jessica, I want to welcome you up here. Can we get her a chair? And this is someone who has been through all kinds of different journeys in life, and you're here and you're well, and we're so glad that you're here, Jessica. So, love you. Yes, can you talk into this so we can record it?
You want me to just hold it?
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how just full of... I'm just engorged with gratitude and love. I feel like my heart's going to burst because my whole family's here. It's the 3rd. I get to share my story at my favorite place in the whole world. I just have so much love in my heart. So I'm going to start with exactly 3 years ago today, where I was and my spiritual journey into where I am today and my recovery. So January 2nd, actually, I entered ICU. I count January 3rd as my sober B day because my blood alcohol level was 0.533. I was 78 pounds. All my organs were failing. I had a blood staph infection I had got because I had been laying in one spot drinking 24 hours a day, and I eventually became immobile because I atrophied down to such a small weight that I wasn't getting up to use the restroom, so I was urinating and defecating on myself, and the acid from my urine had eaten holes in the bony parts of my hips and my tailbone, so from urinating and defecating on myself, I got a blood staph infection, and so that's how I ended up in ICU. I had called an ex-boyfriend who I had been living with when I relapsed, and he could hear the desperation in my voice. So he came the next morning, and he couldn't even walk in the room because I was just bleeding out of my nose and my eyes. I had conjunctivitis. I was just a mess. And he called the ambulance, had showed up, and took me into ICU. My parents came that night, and I was in ICU for like 2 weeks. And the first time I came to, I remember overhearing my dad outside the hospital room say to my granddad, "It looks like she's gonna make it." And I just thought to myself, no way, not again. How did this happen? And going backwards, I had been, a month before that, I had just gotten out of Linwood. I had spent a month in jail I had had some tickets out and a court date I didn't show up to for a felony DUI I had for injuring a family of 7. And so I was in jail for a month. And then when I got out, I had met this guy that was staying at a place, and that's who I laid on the floor and drank. He would go sing outside at Ross. He was like obviously not all there. He would go, I thought he was homeless, but like he kind of had a place. And he was like, "Yeah, you can stay at my place." And so he would go sing outside of Ross for money so that he could just buy me alcohol and bring it back to me so that I could just drink myself to death. It was really, really weird that he was just okay with it. And then he'd wash the sheets and then give me new ones after I peed. And it was just such a really weird situation. But before that, and 6 months prior to this was the bottom, I had a hemorrhagic stroke from falling over a railing of a lady's house that I had met in AA who wasn't sober and was kind of crazy. I was just staying and drinking at her house, and I ended up falling, but it was actually a blessing because I had a stroke, and my mom came and got me, and it was a slow bleed, and it ended up, being the size of an oblong golf ball in the center of my brain and causing paralysis on the left side, and had brain surgery 5 days later. They had to sort of detox me from the alcohol first because my blood was so thin. So they opened up my brain and had to stop the bleeding with some type of fluid. They told my parents, don't expect her to be the same. Don't expect her to have the same sense of humor or have the same personality. She may need, occupational therapy the rest of her life. She may not be able to shower or any of that. And so they were devastated. And I remember they were all there. And I remember they said that after the surgery was like a few hours, and afterwards, my parents called him Yoda because he looked exactly like Yoda, my brain surgeon. And he came out of the room after doing brain surgery, and he's walking down the hall towards my family, and all he does is just a fist pump. And then they knew I was, gonna live. And everything came back by the grace of God. My speech, my memory, my personality. I heard music differently for like a few months. It was really bizarre. I heard like everything sounded like a remix for a while. The brain is so remarkable. It's like a computer. But yeah, so that was the last year of my drinking. So I don't drink for fun. I drink to obliterate and just kill that screaming demon in my chest. Drinking was always felt like I was preventing a heart attack from getting ready to happen. It was like the only thing that would let me breathe. And it had progressed to that. Obviously, there were years where I was functioning, very high functioning. My parents didn't even know I really had a problem until the end because I hid it so well. But there's a bell curve with alcoholism where your tolerance gets so high, like a 300-pound man, but then doing it 24 hours a day, you become saturated, and then your organs aren't filtering out, and then the get well drink in the morning is just making you obliterated, and then that's hell. That's when it's hell, because you no longer can live with it, and you can't live without it, and you can't safely detox because you'll have a seizure or you'll shake until it's literally hell on earth. And I didn't know how to get out of it, and I was so scared, and I knew I was going to die, or and this was in 2009 before my first treatment. So I've been to many rehabs. I've been to rehab like 9 times. I've been in and out of psych wards because my BAC would get so high, and my parents would try to convince them I was drinking myself to death to lock me up and be on a 72-hour hold because they were only feel safe if I was locked up. And you know, I've drinking my own perfume in desperate attempts to avoid withdrawal. I've drinking Listerine was like my drink of choice for a year because I wanted to go to meetings and I didn't want to smell like alcohol, so I literally would get drunk on Listerine to go to AA. And vanilla extract. I'm drinking anything and everything with alcohol. Hand sanitizer, alcohol isopropyl, and it really messes with you. But I was just desperate to just quell that screaming demon. And that hole in the soul that we talk about, it's just was so gaping. It had gotten so big that I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get out of it. And through hitting that bottom, perhaps it's just the fact that I had got so low, and, you know, 51% of me now was like, okay, you're going to die. Let's give this a chance. Like, I literally had no choice but to try and recover. I wanted to live. And so I learned how to walk again at Brotman. I was there for a month. I had physical therapy. My parents let me go I begged them to go. They wanted me to go to treatment again. I didn't trust myself. I thought I would leave. And I went to Napa and I recovered with my family, and it was the best thing. That I'm just so grateful that they let me go with them, because I needed to be nurtured back to health. I needed to be around family. And there, my mom quit drinking. She's not an alcoholic, but she just is codependent. And she quit drinking and went to meetings with me every day. We went to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I just got this recovery in wine country. But, you know, where there is alcohol, there is good recovery. So I recovered in wine country, but it was a beautiful thing. And I did all the steps. And the thing about AA that I love is, you know, people have mixed feelings about A, you know, it's not enough. But even Bill W. says AA is a spiritual kindergarten. You know, we're here to introduce you. We're here to get your life in order, and then go out and explore and get a deeper understanding of God and a deeper connection. And that's really what I found with AA is doing the steps, you know, doing the amends. Forgiveness was huge for me, because I could not find recovery without forgiveness, without getting forgiveness from my family, and without giving it to whomever from my past. But the amends, the step 9, was just monumental. It was like the only way, because my family is my everything. You know, my happiness is contingent upon them. So if anything is out of order, if someone has a resentment towards me, I will drink again. So getting beyond that, everyone talks about step 4, but step 9 for me was huge weight lifted off. And getting a concept, because I really wasn't raised with, there wasn't a lot of spirituality in my house growing up. You know, my mom's side was Mormon, and my dad's side really didn't practice, and they'd go to church on holidays. But so I think that it was almost like uncomfortable to mention it growing up, because it would either start a fight, or my parents had vastly different views on religion. So it was like, okay, let's just not go there. So I think that it almost felt taboo when I got into recovery. It was like, now what do I do with the God thing? Because it's not really my style, my thing. I didn't, you know, but getting in alignment with my own, you know, it was I always felt like God was this, especially the way religions made it out to be, this abstract concept outside of me, like away from me, that it was intangible, it was hard to get in me. But when I started looking inward and feeling like the Holy Spirit was in me, and starting to feel confirmation, guidance, but through myself, then I started feeling in alignment. And I just felt like this, you know, in prayer, like deep prayer, getting on my knees and really asking him to envelop me and be my eyes, like help me to see the world and people through him, and forgive, and just constantly trying to be connected with that inner hold, that divine light, that truth, really lifted me up. And that is the only reason I was able to get through the rest of the steps and the amends, and put my heart and soul into asking for forgiveness, and into, walking this thing and being of service. Being of service is that's a really spiritual thing, because you find you're losing yourself in the service of others. You find your purpose and your passion, and your personality starts to serve the purpose of your soul, and you just get unstoppable and untouchable, and your ego starts to dissolve, and everything peripheral goes away, and you're just soaring, and you just feel on and in the flow state and like in the zone. And it's hard to stay that way, but it's the goal every day, because once you kind of feel that alignment with the Holy Spirit, everything feels right, and you start to trust where you are in life and your story and your journey, and it all becomes, you just get enlightened by that feeling. And I still have days where I get this fear-based thinking comes over me, and I'm not good enough, and my inner critic and my inner judgmental ego comes in and starts trying to edit and filter everything I do and telling me I'm not But if I pray that goes away, those are the days where I do the best. And naturally my subconscious knows what God wants me to say, and I don't need to have the editing at all, And I'm just so grateful to have the friends I do, because that's also part of my family and my friends, because my friends are so... Like Nathan, he's such a light. He's so connected all the time. It's almost uncanny. It's almost unrealistic to be so spiritually aligned all the time. I look up so much to these people, and it's so contagious, and I want to be around it all the time. And I have friends that I'm so transparent with that will keep me straight if they feel like I'm shifting in some way, so it's like having multiple sponsors around, because someone will call me out if I'm acting weird or excessively doing something or acting in an addict type behavior. And it's hard to live in a consumption driven society as an alcoholic. It is a daily struggle, because the theme of our culture is more. It's supersize me, buy two, get the third one for, it's more. It's you will be prettier, smarter, better, more successful if you have a bigger house, a nicer car. Everything is about more. But this has been going on. I think Aristotle has a quote, man is an insatiable wanting machine. It is our nature. We are designed to desire, but unfortunately that makes us perpetually dissatisfied. Everybody sort of has this hole that we want to fill, but we're like, I kind of feel like that might be narcissistic, but we're like the chosen ones that have to get to a spiritual solution to fill that hole, because nothing material or substance can fix that hole. And we're sort of forced to find another solution that actually works. And then we can recognize when we're trying to grab something external outside of ourselves to mediate, to medicate, to pacify that hole. So that, is really hard. I think that growing up, it started with food for me in high school. I had a really, really unhealthy relationship with food, and it was like an all or nothing, really bad, and that was sort of how I filled. And then I found alcohol and started sneaking it from my dad's cupboard at like 13. Once I found alcohol, it was like, this is it. This is the magic medication I've been looking for. And I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. Is it genetic, environmental, circumstantial? I was molested. Who knows if that, I'm sure it contributed, but I felt a genetic flip go off in my head when I had the first drink. It was on. Because it was too good. It was almost spiritual for me. That's the scary thing. I felt like I got in that zone I was talking about when you're of service and you're spiritually connected and you're untouchable and your ego dissolves. That's what I felt when I would drink. Felt like it was my superhero cape. I could speak, I could perform, I would go, do these comedy shows, and I would get on fire, and I felt like that was alcohol. It wasn't me. They were two separate things. And that is what feeds the disease. And in recovery, I've just learned so much about myself. It's been such an introspective, incredible journey and learning experience. And I still, struggle some days. It's not going to go away, but I'm so happy sober now, and I'm so grateful I can come to a spiritual place where people are seeking. I love other seekers because I've always been a seeker and a searcher, and I want more of God, and I want a bigger, stronger connection, and I just have always been looking, and I love people that really feel like they have found that and that are also seeking and want to come and talk about it and get into deep conversation and about it. And I learned a lot about addiction. Unfortunately, knowledge with addiction really doesn't help you, but I had a therapist, and when I was at Kaiser, I had a therapist who used to say, Jessica, you understand that your disease has the same IQ as you, so it's only going to find more clever ways to, go against you. And it did, because I would read these psychology books and books on addiction, and then it would just make me, think that I could manipulate myself. And in rehab, I remember like the counselors in the rehabs, it always boggled my mind that they would sit down, okay, let's go over the prelapse. What were the triggers? Where were you at this point? And I'm thinking, you can't analyze. This is like trying to analyze why a lion takes a bite out of the first weak buffalo in the herd. It's my instinct. You can't analyze or dissect what I'm doing when it's just an impulse. It's how I've coped my whole life for 25 years, however long it was. It's what I go to survive. And that's the irony of the disease of addiction, is I'm trying to survive when I'm getting to the next bottle. I'm doing anything possible, beating my mom up with fry boots, beating her to a pulp, because I'm trying to survive, because I need that drink or I will die. And that reptilian brain that goes crazy and takes over, and you're on autopilot. I mean, that's the power of the cunning, the baffling power of this thing. So I'm just so full of gratitude. I'm so ecstatic. I'm full of ecstasy that my whole family is here, that we're celebrating my 3 years. I've somehow got together 1,065 days. I'm able to share it with you guys, these incredible spiritual people. And it's just a really, really magical evening for me. So thank you for listening to me.
Wow.